Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Truth About Marketing. Stoked to have my guy Daniel Perumal. He's the COO of ThriveSide. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. So, tell us a little bit about ThriveSide. Give us your background. Tell everybody kind of how you got to where you are today and what you're doing over there.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess a little bit about my background. I kind of got my start in the professional world in politics and worked in the state legislature, did a gubernatorial campaign in California, ended up going to DC, worked in a couple of congressional offices while in school there, did a presidential campaign, and then was trying to figure out sort of what the next steps were and got an opportunity to learn digital marketing, really what that was. So, long story short, I ended up in Austin, Texas, where I am now doing digital marketing. And it's funny, a lot of people have asked me, they're saying, hey, that's a big career change to go from politics to marketing. But the reality is it's the same thing. You're trying to market a person versus marketing a thing or a product, service, whatever it is. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so it was really an easy transition. So I did advertising for a while, digital ads. Worked for Gartner, worked for a startup out here, and then recently as in an agency role for one of the largest tech companies in the world. Then was just kind of just feeling like, hey, I want to go try something on my own.
So, what do you guys do at ThriveSide? How are you guys kind of approaching the market? What's different about what you guys do?
Yeah, so what we're doing is maturity modeling for growth. That's really what we say, and usually that gets people saying, "Hey, like, what is that? What does that mean?" And really, what we do is, especially in the marketing world, marketing's frustrating for a lot of people. Marketing's confusing. It's not measurable, and for a lot of businesses, they kind of see marketing as maybe a necessary evil, or they see marketing as like a lever, like, hey, we're going to turn on marketing, then we're going to turn off marketing. And that's really a misunderstanding of what marketing really is.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we define marketing as the actions you take to win at market, and we kind of build from there. So what we do is we help businesses understand where they are in our maturity model. There are maturity models for sales, there's maturity
Right.
models for finance, there's a ton. I mean, it's not a new concept, but what we're really doing is doing maturity modeling specifically for marketing. So we say, hey, in your offering, we identify the offering that you have, and then we take the offering that you have, map it to the model, and then from there we can understand, hey, what are the actions we actually need to take to move to the next step of maturity. So instead of saying, hey, we have a brand new product and we're gonna go just do a bunch of PR, we're gonna run a bunch of Google ads or do a bunch of SEO, whatever it may be, it
Right.
gives you an architecture to understand, hey, what strategies, what tactics do we need to deploy when?
Got it. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people today, because there's so much data available to us, they want to be more data driven. They just don't know how, right? They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know, what success looks like. I mean, because like we can all get the numbers and, you run an ad and it tells you what the numbers are, but it's like, is that good? Is that bad? Like, what does that mean for me? Right.
Yeah,
That's,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So it's
Well,
been a lot of fun.
yeah. So what we always do to start this out, kind of after the intros and getting a baseline of where you're at, is a lightning round. So it's super fun, kind of piques some interest in the conversation and gets people's kind of minds jogged up. So if you're cool with that, we'll do that right now.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So the first one is your favorite marketing technology.
Yeah, so for me, being in the advertising world, I really like LinkedIn. It has a very specific use case, especially for B2B. Come from a lot of B2B advertising, but this idea that you can target people based on attributes of jobs
Mm-hmm.
is really cool and really powerful. So for me personally, in the ad space, I've used a bunch of different technologies for different things, but my favorite, for whatever reason, is LinkedIn. It is not the prettiest UI. It is sometimes fails, and just it's just not the cleanest. But I just love it personally.
Okay.
So I would say LinkedIn.
And then favorite social channel. So that might be a double whammy.
No, so I kind of think of social channel, at least taking off my marketing ads guy hat, as a user myself. I would say Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days.
Yep.
Um, Big sports fan, and I love news, especially on a Saturday or Sunday. You're sitting there watching football, and you need to know, hey, what's
Yeah.
happening with the injury. There's just no better way to get quick data, and it's really, I think, replaced a lot of traditional news, for better or for worse. So I personally, as a user, love X.
Awesome. I'm a big fan of it too. I mean, I use it every day. If I see some news or I hear something, X is the first place I go.
Yeah.
Um, Least favorite social channel.
Yeah, I feel bad for our friends over in Menlo Park, but I have to say Facebook. I it's funny. I remember I was probably 13, 14 getting Facebook for the first time. It was the coolest thing. You move over from MySpace or whatever.
Yep.
That probably dates me a little bit, but it is what it is.
Oh man, I
Um,
remember having to have a college email, right? And like you
yeah,
had,
exactly. Yeah,
I was like, yes.
yeah. You're in, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Facebook for me, it still provides value. I think for most people, maybe in the millennial and Gen Z generations, I guess it's more really the only reason to use Facebook is for the marketplace. People love to buy and sell things on marketplace. Um,
Yeah, I've used it for that. I just sold a car on there, so I mean,
oh, there you go.
but my biggest gripe with them right now with Facebook and Instagram is that it's there's just so much reliance on like promotion and having to spend money to be visible at all, whether you're a person or a business. Like the algorithms are just, I don't know. I've started to get fed up with both of them, to be honest. But
I totally agree. I think they've kind of hit that point where there hasn't really been anything new, and it just seems like you're getting more and more ads,
yeah,
and they're just extracting the money out of it, and ultimately that's not a recipe for long-term success. So we'll see what they do. Maybe they another trying stuff with VR goggles and things
right.
like that, but
Yeah.
who knows, we'll see. So
Yep. All right. Brand or person with good marketing.
yeah, I would say Apple. Got a chance to work closely with Apple, and I am just continually blown away. And I think it's really a good understanding. They do a really good job. Again, going back to sort of the maturity modeling, they really understand where the place that they are in the market, and they are just really careful of making sure they hold that place.
Mhm.
There are things obviously that are new from Apple, things like Apple Music, a lot of their services that are new, but ultimately the most important thing for Apple is their brand and their market share with iPhone. And so their ability to sustain themselves as a company is really around not pissing everyone off, right? And making sure you still have that silky smooth UI and everything works together. And there's this system that you have where you have a watch, you have an iPhone, you have your AirPods, you have your
Yep.
Mac, you have your iPad, and they've just built it and it goes really well. So I over and over, I'm just really impressed with Apple.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to knock them. Their design and everything, I mean, it's been really reliable for a long time. And I think, from a brand perspective, it's very, simple, clean. I don't think they ever get too edgy or anything like that. So, they've always been able to be very good at appealing to the masses, right? They're not one side or the other. They just do a really good job of walking that line. So,
Yeah.
um, person or brand that needs help with marketing.
Yeah, so I don't want to get political, even though I come from a political background. But so I'll be careful with this one. But I would say what happened with Bud Light was a classic example of misunderstanding an audience. And again, Bud Light is in that spot where they're not necessarily needing to grow a ton. They already have a pretty established spot in the market. And they, just as Apple does well with championing their community that is their customers, Bud Light did not, right?
Right.
And what they did, and then going through using an influencer that was controversial, and then going back that was also controversial on using the influencer, it just showed a real lack of understanding of who their audience is, why people buy Bud Light. The reality is, like, if you want to have a really sophisticated drink, you're not going to be drinking from a blue can of Bud Light. Like that's just not going to happen. You're going to be sipping on a martini or an old fashioned, whatever it is. But hey, if you're at a frat party or if you're, hanging out with the boys, eating pizza, watching football, like, yeah, you might be drinking Bud Light. And so their brand just totally misunderstood the audience. And there was this need, I can understand this need to continue to grow, but they just really misunderstood what their role in the market was. And they're still paying the price today.
Yeah, I actually, it was super interesting. I said the other day on X, I was like, man, whoever is the UFC slash, PR people now that are working on it, Dana White, they nailed that messaging. Like
Yeah.
them coming out with that partnership, and Dana White coming out and saying, listen, mistakes are made. People make mistakes all the time. He's like, what I am focused on is the good that Anheuser-Busch does. All the, support the troops, the, Folds of Honor program, the millions of jobs over the years that they've provided to Americans. You know what I mean? Like they owned that message. And like now I mean, again, not being political or anything like that, just looking at it from a purely take a step back and marketing and messaging, it was like, wow, they've been in a world of hurt for months and they were able to pull off this partnership and then also message it accordingly that like, hey, stop looking at this. We're done. It's in the past. We're moving forward. Focus on the good that we've done. I thought it was a master class in PR.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, yeah, it was a good showing of, again, it's they're re-understanding the place in the market, re-understanding their audience and saying, hey, look, you're right. Cause I've heard this said with Americans, and maybe this is different now, but we're kind of forgiving. You can mess up once. Now, if you're messing up twice, three times, okay, things,
Right.
get a little crazy. But yeah, I thought it was really good. And it was funny too, because I remember, I think it was Bud Heavy, so at Anheuser, but whatever it's called, and just Budweiser, right? Just
Yeah.
Budweiser, and
Anheuser-Busch. Yeah.
yeah, and they started doing things with Harley Davidson, which I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I see where they're heading. Like they're trying to go to this direction, and then you're right,
Yeah.
like they pulled it off. But I think it also is a cool opportunity to rebuild and say, hey, what happened, but we don't necessarily just want to get back to where we were. We want to continue to grow and gain market share from, the Modelo. I think that they're the number one beer now. And
Yeah. I mean,
so,
I will say the one, like, from looking to the past and now where we are today, I also just look at it's not just Budweiser but Anheuser. Like everyone's gotten kind of soft as far as like the marketing, advertising. It's like there used to be such great commercials, like edgy, fun, and like if anything, they were pissing people off that way, being like, too edgy or too, and now it's just like everything's so safe. And then what was funny is like it's almost like the pendulum went from this, then it went this way, and they swung too far by trying to be too inclusive and forgetting like who their audience was. It was
yeah,
like, man, you guys have like now gone so far that you missed the mark completely, right? So
yeah,
it's interesting. We could do hours talking about that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
so the next one is your favorite influencer or business leader.
Yeah, so I kind of gave it double answer. So one of them's dead. He's been dead for a while. And so we'll start with that one. I love history. I was also I went to the Air Force Academy. So while you're there, you're learning a lot about history and military history and all that. I've always loved Dwight Eisenhower. I think
Okay.
he's an incredible person, and specifically when it comes to business leader, he's not an influencer, obviously, but as a leader, what specifically one of the things I go back to over and over again is when he's getting ready to invade Normandy. And even throughout the invasion and going all the way to Berlin, he's having to deal with juggling American interests. He has to juggle the British interests, the Canadians, the Anzac, which is Australia and New Zealand troops. And he's always having to he's essentially being a politician, right? He was a good general, but the thing that made him incredible and above all else was his ability to get a truly allied group together. And British people were being commanded by Americans on British soil for the first time in their history, right?
Right.
And that interesting needle to thread it blows me away every time. And the size and scale of the invasion at Normandy truly blows me away. So I would say him. I'm a huge Eisenhower fan. Um, I just did the $100 million offer too with Alex Hormozy, who's living, who's an influencer.
Nice.
I really like him. I really like that way of looking at it.
Right.
There's just so much recently, and it's like you don't need an MBA, you don't need all these things, you just need that idea. And I really like, I resonate with, as a small business owner myself, is
Mhm.
sort of that dogged mentality, trying over and over and over again, because ultimately you'll figure that out. I just learned a lot from that book. Highly suggestive for anyone who hasn't read it, but that would be my second one. So probably
Nice.
the first time.
I haven't got that one yet. There's a lot of people that have come on this and really love Hormozy, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Um, I guess then the last one is, brand or person you'd like to work with the most.
Yeah. I there's a lot of different things that I could go with. I'll just say this because I'm wearing their shirt. I really like this Poncho brand shirt. They're out of Austin. I don't think they have any brick and mortars yet, but they make really comfortable shirts, and they are in a market, and it's sort of the pearl snap kind of deal, Western shirt.
Yep.
But they're really comfortable. It's almost like a Lululemon material. So I really love them. They got me on an Instagram ad. Just I probably got served 8 at least that, like, I remember, before I finally was like, all right, I'll try it. And now you see them all over Austin. So they've been really growing. You can see a lot of times they're sold out of their stuff, which is a good sign for them. So I love them, and I think I have about 6 of their shirts.
Nice.
So yeah, that'd be a one that, just a small brand. I really love the idea of taking a small brand and helping them grow.
Nice. Yeah, no, I actually have one of their shirts too. It's actually
Oh,
really great.
nice.
Great
Yeah.
material. Big fan. Yeah, my
Yeah.
father-in-law, he's a big outdoors guy, and so I
Oh,
think
cool.
he found the brand, and yeah, great shirts.
Sick.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, so, as we get back into, direct marketing about ThriveSide and what you guys are kind of doing and everything, what kind of drew you to go do something like this that at the end of the day, you know, marketing has always kind of, I don't want to say that it hasn't been disrupted, it has, but people have traditionally gone about it the same way. I think it's interesting that you guys were going to go try to take this approach. Like, kind of what made you do that?
Yeah, I think it's a we had worked with so many brands and agencies before. My co-founder, he owned an agency. I think he actually still does own a significant part of it, but ran an agency for 15 years. I had worked for probably around 10 years, somewhat in marketing,
Hmm.
and it felt like you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, so I was working at Gartner, and one of the things that I felt there, and Gartner is a well-respected brand, they're well run. I don't really think that there's nothing like really wrong about them, but I think it is emblematic of where the industry is we felt like we were truly an in-house agency. We had a Gartner email, we were Gartner employees, we got a paycheck from Gartner, but at the same time there was no buy-in from our team. And it felt like over and over again you just hear from some C-level person like, hey, we need to go do this, and we just go and execute, and we do it for as long as we can, and
Right.
then we say, hey, stop. And I just it really like pissed me off, because I'm looking at this over and over and over again. And then throughout my advertising career, you always hear this, like someone says, just turn off all the ads, or turn on all the ads, or do this, do this. And it's like, how can you run a business? Why can sales and product talk so well to each other, where
Right.
sales can say, hey, look, we can't sell this product unless we have this feature, go make this feature. Or product can say, we have a kick-ass new feature, go make this or go sell this. And they can talk really well to each other, but because marketing, it's hard to measure, it seems like it just kind of gets kicked out. And
Yeah.
it's like, hey, we don't really want to talk too much about it. So ultimately, for me and for my co-founder as well, I think it was a just frustration. In some ways we've come a long way with marketing. We've gone a long ways from the Mad Men, you're sitting in a smoke filled room on
Right.
Madison Avenue, and John Hamm is making a drawing and pitching you after 3 martinis.
Right.
But no, and a lot of that has come through the digital age and a lot of technology and a lot of cool ways like advertising that you can approach marketing. But fundamentally, it still feels like marketing is in its own corner and that they're not really taking an active role in the business. And so
Hmm.
what we kind of did here is what we really want to do is get everyone on the same page, get everyone, because everyone who works for a company, especially if you're an executive, you are a marketer.
Right.
You are marketing your company. You sell the product, you bring your product to market, you are a marketing, right? And so to get everyone on the same page and everyone understand where they're going, really brings marketing back into the fold in a well-run organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit more about that too, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't really realize. If you're a good marketer, you can do a lot of other things in other roles, right? So you talked about switching careers. I did it myself. I was in marketing for 8+ years, and then all of a sudden I had an opportunity to go do enterprise sales. Well, they were like, "How are you just going to give our PR guy a Salesforce account and think that he can sell?" And I'm like, "You realize that I did PR for 8 years. I was selling our story and creating a narrative so that writers and editors would be interested in our company. They didn't get anything in return." I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
as a salesperson, at least they're getting a product. You know what
Right,
I mean?
right.
Like I'm selling, so they're paying me, but I'm
Yeah,
giving them a product, right? So
yeah.
talk a little bit about that because I think the translation for like again the ability to market and be a good marketer translates so well in many different other positions, like just like yourself.
Yeah, sure. I one of the fascinating things that we've seen with clients that we've had is some of the people that really love us are CFOs.
Hmm.
And you think of very numbers oriented, and the great thing for them that now they're understanding, hey, um, we can now measure, we understand, we have a roadmap, and now I can put dollars and cents behind it, and I can start measuring really what's happening there. And so,
Yep.
kind of taking that on the flip side, what really we're doing for that CEO is we're empowering them, or we're saying, hey, look, like now you can have a conversation with all your CFO buddies and say, hey, look, this is our guaranteed outcome to the customer. This is what we're doing over and over and over again. This is what we validated. We know this is our solution that we are taking to market.
Yep.
We have done this so well that we are a one of one. One of the things that Alex Hormozy talks about in the book is this idea of going from a free market economy, which is, your macroeconomics discussion that, the class that everyone has to take in college, and going from a supply demand, because ultimately if you are in this large competitive industry, you're maybe eking out a living. If you're doing well, you're maybe growing a little bit, but just by the economic forces, you're going to really struggle. And so this idea is like you are taking your product, understanding what makes your product uniquely better, not just different but better,
Right.
and then taking that and moving yourself into a one of one product. And so for a CFO who can then understand and say, hey, our product is the only product in the world that does this.
Right.
And really setting everyone up in that leadership team in who is participating in marketing. They are marketers
Right.
now, and they are able to then go sell this. And the great thing is, once you kind of get to that monopoly, right, you are one of one, you're the only one playing in that space. Then from a price standpoint, then the question is just how much value you're producing. And so
Right.
if you're producing a ton of value, if you say, hey, if you sign up for a product, you're going to make $1 billion, but you're going to pay us 500 million,
Right.
we'll take that 10 times out of 10 and you do really well, right? So that's kind of what we're thinking, what we're trying to get to people who are struggling with marketing, who are confused and saying, I don't get it, I'm bummed out, or for some reason we can't grow, we've tried a bunch of things. And it's really just sort of taking things and really rethinking how you really take a product to market.
Well, and I want to touch on a couple things that you said there because I think one of the hardest conversations in marketing is the ROI, right? So people
Yeah,
want to say like, well, if we give you $5,000 a month, how are we going to get that back? And it's
right.
like there's so much. Like I could break down and give you a million. There's brand awareness, brand equity, how many followers did you get? And that doesn't necessarily mean direct ROI, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's important to people. Then other times, like, no, we just need sales. I want transactional. You tell me if I give you 1,000, how much you give me back? Well,
Mm-hmm.
the other part is that there's labor involved, there's cost of production, there's content creation, like on top of the ad spend that you have to do with said Google, Facebook, Instagram, whoever, right?
Sure.
So that's always a really funny thing. Talk a little bit about how you approach those conversations, especially from ThriveSide's point of view, where it's like everything is data driven. So how do you approach that, or have those conversations now?
Yeah. So, ultimately, data is sort of this double-edged sword, right? And now more than ever, we have numbers. We have numbers on everything. And, you can, as it's funny, as an advertiser, you can easily, if you have something going wrong, you can just give the client a ton of numbers and you bury the little thing in there and
Yeah.
the bad thing. And like, it's just this like incredible amount of information. You're like, oh my gosh, I served, 1.2 million impressions. That
Right.
sounds impressive. It's not. No one actually, impressions don't really matter,
Right.
but you can do all these things. And so data is this is a is what it is. It's not good, it's not bad. It gives you information, but then it's really what you do with that information. And so, for us, if having been this having done this a bunch, and I still have a few clients where I run ads with, and people will come to me and saying, hey, I would like to run ads.
Hmm.
And really what I try to get to is, you can say, hey, I want 100 clicks a day on my website. How am I going to get that? And really what I want to do is back it up and say, whoa, 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 whoa. We'll get back to the 100 clicks. That's important. But let's get to the why. Let's get to really understanding the why, and then also understanding how you are thinking about your product, what really you are taking, what makes you, again, the uniquely better piece of it, and then building from there. And once you, I think, have those conversations, once you start from the foundation and you can say, look, what are you really trying to accomplish? What is your goal? And then how does the marketing go into your goal? I think if you have those conversations, you understand then the ROI, then I need a 40% ROI. Well, why do you need a 40% ROI?
Right.
Well, because my CFO says this. Well, why does your CFO says that? And once you get to sort of the root of why you're doing something, then I think you can get a lot more alignment on, hey, I am not going to guarantee a 40% ROI.
Sure.
But you know what I can guarantee? That everyone in your organization is going to know this is why we're doing this. We're still going to test. We're still going to use the best principles of advertising, and we're going to do some content creation, and we're going to do everything there. But now you have this alignment, and you're not being held to this metric that oftentimes is just seems like it's out of nowhere. And there's no
Yeah.
real understanding of why it comes from. And then, honestly, if people aren't willing to do that, I would say this isn't a long term partner for you. You probably
Right.
don't want that, because this happens over and over. And I just really empathize in sort of this agency world where, as an agency, you're told, you hear someone, a client comes to you and they RFP you or whatever, and they say, we want this. We want you to run $50,000 over 3 months of TikTok ads.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. And then you get to the thing, you figure out how to do that, figure out how to make your money, all this thing. But you're looking at it, you're like, man, this is not going to work. And you're in this conundrum, right? You're
Right.
like, morally, I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to try my damnedest to make sure it does work, but I don't know if it's actually going to work.
Hmm.
But then, if you don't get the job, then someone else is going to get the job. And, kind of in the back of your mind, this probably isn't the best strategy, but this is what they're asking for. And I'm going to provide it. And I'm going to try to provide for myself and my employees. I'm going to take the project, right? I'm going to make money and I have to go feed. And so it's just a frustrating and just incredibly frustrating to do that. And so I think getting back to and really understanding, getting alignment from a client and a provider, whatever that providing looks like, really kind of breaks down a lot of those, like, hey, we want to be data driven, because usually if people say they're data driven, they're not.
Yeah.
Um, it's like
Well, I
it's
mean,
one of those things you always know. It's like, no, you're not.
but you brought up a good point that like what happens a lot is that like you get into these conversations and they say that they want data and they want to make data driven decisions, but like I can, like you said, I can provide a bunch of data, but do you really know what that means? Like, because
Right.
I can also manipulate the data in any way that sounds good to me, which I don't do. I don't want to do. And if like
Right.
something's not working, it's not working, right?
Yeah.
But like there are a lot of people, and unfortunately, agencies that do that. They'll say, oh, we got you this article and it had this has this many viewers, or oh, and one of the biggest ones that always pissed me off in PR was, oh, we got you this contributor in Forbes, and Forbes has, X amount of million viewers a month. Yes, the cover story writers or
Right.
the, full time Forbes employees get massive thousands amounts of views.
Right.
The contributor who is just part of a tech council and or just gets like one article a month gets like 500 views, right?
Yeah.
Like let's not confuse the two. And so that's the other thing is I think a lot of marketing leadership, and I think this just goes back to as anything else is ongoing education, like understanding dynamics, understanding. So, is ThriveSide as a part of what you guys are doing? Is there like an education element piece of it? I mean, are you guys really like, because to me, even as having been a marketing leader, like it's like sometimes I also need to continue my education and understand things because like even if I'm paying for a service and then somebody just kicked me back a bunch of AI stuff, right? AI generated content, like I don't
Yeah.
know, I could be getting fleeced.
Yeah. No, sure. Yeah, I totally agree. In terms of education, we offer our framework, what we do for free. There's nothing, um, we will go talk to anyone. We will present it. We'll help you understand how we're looking at it. And if you don't agree, then that's great. And, but this is just like another data point, and hopefully it can make you think a little bit. Um, and then really the way that we monetize, I mean, we're pretty transparent is, hey, if you're saying this is really interesting, but I don't quite know how to go about that, then we'll
Mhm.
step in and we'll walk you through that process over a pretty short time. And then, if there are other things that then come out on the other end, like, hey, we actually really need a website, or we are really going to need a PPC campaign, but we really understand why and in what context those exist, then we have Book of Excellence. We have people that we work with that have bought into the model. They are going to really understand what you're saying when you
Mhm.
say certain things, and we can help kind of facilitate that transition. But yeah, I mean, what we're really wanting to do is my co-founder says, he really wants to just fundamentally change how people look at marketing,
Yep.
and that doesn't mean that we're going to work with every company in the world, but what we really would want to do is just say, hey, look at this. If you disagree, let us know. Like,
Yeah.
say, I don't think this is good, but maybe this is good. But yeah, that's really kind of the approach that we've taken. Um, and just because, I think it's needed, and it's been, years and decades of just banging your head against the wall, being like, man, there has to be something a little bit better here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's just so much out there that also too that was something that I read the other day where people try to check every box. Like they're going to be on every social platform, do email marketing, do CPC, do it's like honestly sometimes it doesn't like again, so data won't support you doing all those things and neither will your budget. It's like sometimes you just need to double down on an area where you think you can succeed. You know what I mean? And so and again, I hate the fact that people just need a company or quote unquote expert to tell them that. But it's like anything else in life, if from a skill set as a person, right? If I'm really good at football or really good at baseball, at some point I'm gonna stop playing soccer, swimming. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you gotta kind of just double down on what you think you're good at.
Well, yeah, and I think too, it kind of comes back to this, paralysis by options, right? It's a little bit like when I feel like, when you go figure out what college you want to go to.
Sure.
I remember like in when I was what, I guess a sophomore, junior, you start looking at colleges and you're like, okay. And you get a, the US News book, or you probably go online now, but it's like this thick. And you're like, all right, here are all the colleges in America. Go pick one.
Yep.
And you're like, holy cow. And then obviously you start narrowing that down and you say, well, okay, I live here. I don't want to go across the country. Or I hate the heat. I hate the cold. And you start narrowing it down. And then you maybe pick maybe on like a high end 10 schools that you go and visit. And then it's funny because, for myself, I started at the Air Force Academy. I finished school at George Washington in DC. And so I went to tour George Washington, and I remember being blown away on how underwhelming it was. And I
Yeah.
remember when I was 17 going around visiting colleges, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a dining hall, right?
Yeah.
I can go eat pizza, like, or I can go run around. I don't have to check in with my parents. All these things are so exciting. This is a dorm room. This is all my own. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Then when I go and I end up transferring to George Washington, I'm like, yeah, this is a dorm room. I know what a dorm room looks like. It's no longer
Right.
exciting, right? But what you realize is when you're 17, you're making a lot of decisions that really do affect the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're making it for kind of random reasons. And
Yeah.
hopefully you have teachers, mentors, parents, whoever it may be that can help you narrow your decision. But there are, I mean, your college is one of those big decisions that you make at a time where you're probably not quite at the level of like making the best decisions. And you might make a decision of like, hey, I want to go to the school because they have a really good pizza. And that I think that happens, right? And so going back to marketing, it's sort of the same thing. It's like there are so many options. Either people try to boil the ocean and say, all right, I'm going to go try everything. And
Yeah.
for people to do that, honestly, like good for you. I think you're gonna exhaust yourself. But and it's also not a good strategy. But like at least, good for you, you're trying and you're doing a bunch of things. Or you're deciding, hey, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that for the wrong reasons. And getting to that point of like, hey, can we actually make decisions for the right reasons? I think is really important. But it's hard. It really is when there are so many options out there. When you say even paid social, right? I remember back in the day, paid social was just Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of LinkedIn. Now there's a bunch of different Facebook or paid social platforms that you can go advertise on. So yeah, there are more and more. You can even run Netflix ads. That's a new thing, right? Things like that. And so what it's just so many options. It really is.
Well, I think it's interesting too, though, that like depending on who you talk to, but there's so much personal preference that comes in, and you're like missing the idea that like, okay, hey, you're selling coffee, or you're selling, a fitness program, or and people's own personal preferences come into it. And it happens all the time. And I'm like, especially, I will tell you right now, one of the biggest ones is people's like aversion to TikTok. And I'm like, you might not like it or you might not understand it, but that is where people are. Like
Yeah.
eyeballs are flocking to TikTok and short form content. And because they don't understand it and they don't like it, it's almost, to me, it's almost the opposite. I'm like, perfect. If some 40, 50-year-old tells me that they don't like it and they don't understand it, that's where we need to be. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, because that's where it's gonna come. And I'm, again, to your point, everything's about audience, understanding who you're trying to speak to, where they live, where they operate, and really going to where your potential customer is. But when people start talking about just visibility, brand awareness, growing, and I mean, man, it's changing all the time, and you have to be willing to adapt to it. And to your point, if you're doing things for the wrong reasons, you're not going to win, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and like
tough.
awareness, that I mean that just that word, it's tough. I understand what people mean when they say brand awareness, and you're getting into really upper funnel things, and you're probably, if you're in brand awareness, you're probably using a display or a paid social, and depending on where your like training is, you could say, okay, paid socials here, it's a little bit more, it's a little lower down the funnel, but
Yep.
plays and the whole thing, and you can get really like fun about like marketing nerd about things. But for brand awareness, that yeah, it was just always funny to me of, hey, again, understanding where that you are in a funnel and where what platform you're using, whether it's display or paid social, that's your upper
Mhm.
funnel. And then you're going to have maybe other upper funnel things, like that's probably where PR goes, right? And everything that's really upper funnel. And we're saying, hey, this is brand awareness. Well, okay, but is there any way to understand like how people go in the funnel other than maybe you have like some crazy remarketing pixel or something like that? But it really is hard when like it was just always so funny to me. If we would say, hey, we're running a brand awareness campaign, like sick. To me, that just says we're, unless it's really well thought out, but my initial gut reaction is we're going to go waste a bunch of money, and
Yeah.
this brand awareness campaign is going to be off about a week into this campaign because people are like, this is stupid.
Well, and I think though too, because of the ease of access and ease of ability to create and put content out, it's not the same as it was like 10 years ago. To say you're going to do a brand awareness campaign because you wanted to like create stuff and get out in front of
Mm.
people, the cost of that was more about the creation and the you know leading up to putting all the content out. It wasn't
Yeah,
so much the ad spend or the billboard, or that you were more talking about, hey, all the efforts that we're doing into this is brand awareness.
right.
Now, because of like the pressure on margins and bottom line and everything else, you're kind of always having to have some sort of like revenue goal in mind. There's always some sort of like execution element that like it's more about the money returned than it is any kind of awareness. And so I just think it's really interesting when people still do talk brand awareness and they're talking about anything other than organic. Like,
Yeah.
unless there's some multi million dollar company, like you really should have KPIs that are somehow finding revenue back. Like,
Hmm.
in my opinion, I just like if you're a little tiny small company, you're like, oh, we need to do brand awareness. Like, to me, your brand awareness is some sort of guerrilla marketing campaign or some sort of like, bootstrapped, I'm trying to create a viral video, not this whole like campaign that stretches across all these different channels. It takes a ton of time, effort, and resources. If it's not bringing me revenue back, I'm not a huge fan of it.
Yeah, and you think about even awareness for if you're a large company, if you're Coca-Cola or something like that, and you do something organically, it will get picked up,
Yeah.
right? If you're Coca-Cola and you're saying, you do a press release and say, hey, we are releasing a new version of Diet Coke, it's going to be news everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now you own that, and that is like truly the earned media. You have earned it through your brand positioning, through your sales, through everything that you have done. But when and I'm sure if Coke were to do something like that, there would be a paid element to it.
Right.
But ultimately, it's really just getting people like, oh my gosh, they're doing what? Versus a small company that has zero recognition from a brand perspective. And they're having to go and essentially rent a platform. They don't have their own platform, and they're having to rent it. And they're having to rent it with either, hey, we're going to pay X, Y, and Z to get a placement in this news source, or we're going to rent Facebook, we're going to rent Instagram, we're going to rent TikTok, whatever it may
Yeah.
be,
Yep.
and that is a necessarily, by the idea of renting, is you're spending money on doing that and you don't have your platform. So I would much rather you as a small business go into the, hey, how do I need in my specific area of growth, what do I need? Like, let's just say you're bringing a new product to market, you've worked on this, you're an engineering company, you've developed a new widget, and you're saying, all right, I'm ready to take this to market, start testing it. And
Right.
people are going to give me feedback and they say, hey, I like this, I don't like this, right? Then you iterate and you do that over and over again, then you're eventually ready to go make a broader
Right.
go to market push. Well, if you do that, then what about the people in your industry? What about whatever that widget is? And it could even be in your city. You go
Mhm.
talk to the people. Who are the people that own the retail in this city, who that are big in the CPG space, or whatever it may be, and you go talk to those people and say, hey, I would really like you to try this out, right? Ultimately, relationships are still going to be really important, and your ability to influence influencers, right? And influencers in sort of the small I way. This isn't people who are going and making a TikTok video, but they are the people who truly have influence over a market,
Right.
And you go to them, can you get them? Because if they are at that point where they say, hey, I champion this, whatever this is, right? Like Joe Rogan's like the perfect example. I think there's a bunch of things that he just says, oh, I really like it. Well, he has a broad influence, and you're not maybe
Right.
always going to be able to get Joe Rogan, but he is a good example of love this so much, I'm going to champion this for
Yep.
free, and there's incredible results from that. And so I would much rather go do that. We call it like this influencer exercise that we go through, because you're right. Because if you're a small company, you have other things to worry about, and because ultimately you're you have your own other things to do. You
Yep.
have to figure out how to make the product. You have to pay your lawyers. You have to get patents. There's a lot of other business functions that still need to happen, and so don't make it overly complicated by trying to spread yourself really thin through this brand awareness exercise.
Well, so I was going to ask too, though. So, at what point when I mean, you guys deal, I'm sure, with small, medium, large businesses, but like, what for you guys at ThriveSide, what is kind of like your ideal client? Like, where are you starting to tell people to really look into this kind of data driven approach and really kind of look at things differently? Because again, I know I've worked with a lot of small startups that it's like, hey, in the beginning, you're just trying to set your foundation, trying to like kind of, establish yourself on the, most popular channels, get an email going, but you're not really like, you know, the data's not really there yet. So at what point are you advising or really engaging with teams or companies to say, hey, this is now you're ready for this?
Yeah, sure. I would say, in terms of startups, there is some value there for sure, and there are exercises that we can do. And I would say the biggest value is not trying a bunch of marketing stuff. That's not going to be helpful. That is like really our biggest value is we're going to say, hey, let's focus on these couple things. But really, what we found to be our kind of sweet spot is companies who have sort of moved away from that startup. They're a little bit more established. They've been around for a while.
Right.
They're maybe making 5 to 25 million a year, roughly, and they are in the SMB. They're more M than S,
Yeah.
but and they've established, but they've kind of hit that point of like, all right, sweet, we have taken a market, we have made our investors happy, and that we have something, but now we're a little bit stuck. One of the things that we love to hear is, "I hate marketing." That's great. That's great. Like we can work with it. If you hate marketing, we're your people. So
Music to my ears. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because it's a way to understand like what is this? Because again, most people hate marketing because they don't know what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, we love to also for companies who are like, yeah, I've been growing, and we haven't been really hitting our growth numbers, or we're looking at 2024, it's going to be tough. Just sort of in that kind of petering out, a little bit confused, not really sure what to do next.
Yeah.
That's what we've really found. And I guess one thing too, we actually had a client who um, they had to declare bankruptcy.
Okay.
They had a bunch of litigation, and they had to declare bankruptcy, and they're in dire straits. They really were. And we were connected with them and worked through everything, worked through our process. And, we just heard back from them that they hit their Q3 sales numbers. We're like, oh, cool. Like, that's great. And,
Nice.
but they said they actually hit their Q3 sales numbers pre bankruptcy, which
Oh,
was amazing, which is so cool. And like, you hear that and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So, I
right.
mean, they're in a spot where they're like, we they're in an industry where reputation is everything.
Yeah.
And um, just to hear that and all we did was just work through and really help them understand what they were taking to market, and they were able to do that. So yeah, I would say that that's kind of our sweet spot.
Nice. Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Cool. Well, so like we're at kind of that point. So is there anything that, we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about or ask me?
um it's a good question. um yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, how long have you been doing this podcast specifically? And I think when we had talked before, you had said that this has been something that has been on your mind for a while, and just love to hear sort of your experience and some of the things that you've learned and all that through that experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, when I was in between gigs, after the last year and then kind of transitioning into starting my own thing and building up, ultimately it's kind of like you said, it's funny, this like brand awareness or like getting your name out there. I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to kind of do a podcast, and because I have a large network and I love talking to people and I love creating content, that I was like, there's so many people that are so smart that I know that I'd love to pick their brains and share that information with other people. And so that's how it got started. But then ultimately what happened was, as I was doing it and creating, I was getting more people reaching out to me, like asking, hey, I'd love to work with you. Hey, could you advise on this? Or hey, could you consult for that? And so what turned from a passion project that I was really just not doing it. I mean, it's not like I get paid for, doing these interviews.
Sure.
It turned into like a really nice like referral source for me, that
Yeah.
people were like, wow, okay, Colin knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about. And then, the people that I surround myself with, they're like, wow, so he has access to a lot of good people too,
Hmm.
whether or not it's me working with them or, maybe they heard somebody like yourself, right? So maybe somebody hears about ThriveSide and they're like, hey, I would love to go kind of pick their brains and get some maybe data-driven approaches to marketing going for ourselves. Like, it's awesome, right? So,
Yeah.
that's really where it stemmed from. And then now it's just continued on. I tried to commit to doing one a week, which is a lot. I think I've probably missed maybe 2 weeks, and it was just, whether somebody canceled or, was sick, right? But other than that, I've been pretty steady committed to it. And I really just enjoy the conversations. Again, like, we just met, so it was cool having
Yeah.
that interaction. And then there's some people that I've known for years that I get to just reconnect and have some really good conversations. So it's been awesome, man.
That's cool. That's really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is fun.
Absolutely. I mean, again, there's a million and one podcasts out there. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, like, people who watch these whole things, that's awesome. I love it. But like Joe Rogan, you made a perfect example about him earlier. Dude, the guy's podcasts are 3 hours long. Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no version of me watching 3 hours of a Joe, or listening even, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love to go search and see his content and little snippets. And the same
Yeah.
thing happens here, right? Like, I have these hour-long podcasts, and some people who have an hour to spare, 45 minutes to spare, maybe they'll listen to the whole thing. But ultimately, what comes out of it is there's a lot of good short form and like snippets of these conversations that we have that are great, and people can see it and consume it, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, whatever. That's where I think the value comes from, and we're going to continue to see that evolution. I think in the beginning, podcast people loved it, but the idea, there's just so many good ones out there and so much valuable content, but we don't have time in the day to listen to them all. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. There's something funny, I think, also in podcasts that, Apple really owned that space for a long time. I mean, it's literally in the name.
Mhm.
Um, but it, it's interesting because they're really, I mean, yes, you can get ads on podcasts, but I think it's a pretty rudimentary system. You can still skippable. Spotify's like a little bit advanced with
Yeah.
their, um, but it just seems like such a really untapped, very immature market from a like Martech standpoint,
Yeah.
or just a tech standpoint. It's not even really Martech, but um, I don't know. I'm just fascinated to see where it goes in the next 5-10 years, because people do listen to it and people are, at home or working out, whatever it may be. I mean, it's a really cool medium, and really feels like no one's really taken the opportunity of like finding out, not only from like an advertising standpoint, but even like recommendation algorithms. I feel like I always have to be searching for things and all that. I'm like, there's got to be a better way, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we're just completely untapped right now in a lot of areas, and
Yeah.
AI, machine learning, all this stuff's changing stuff. VR, AR is going to change a lot of things. Once everybody gets those, that new uh, VR that they got, that's like the $3,000 headset. I'm sure
Oh
once
yeah.
people got that, and you're going to get, these pop ups in the thing and like ads and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
I just saw a thing this morning where they said, AI has done more in the past year than we did in the previous 10, right? And it was the same thing. It was the same thing years ago when they were like, we've created more data in the last, 12 months than we did the last 50 years, right? Because
Yeah.
yes, there's more access, there's more consumption, there's more, you know what I mean? So when it becomes more generally available, obviously, there's how many hundreds of millions of people out there using this stuff. It's clearly going to grow and grow pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
super interesting. But Daniel, I appreciate it. I got to
Yeah.
give one more shout out to High Level, fantastic marketing software that I use it both to run this podcast and for my business. Uh, there's a free demo link in my bio and also in this video. check it out. You can run everything on there, your marketing, your funnels, your website, email, social, all of it. So awesome platform. Check it out, gohighlevel.com. Daniel, thank you again. I appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.